5. The day came at last when, lo, the town again, first the outskirts, then the centre. They had lost the notion of time, but all pointed to the Lord's day, or day of rest, the streets, the sounds, the passers-by. Night was falling. They prowled about the centre, at a loss where to go. Finally, at the suggestion of Mercier, whose turn it must have been to lead, they went to Helen's. She was in bed, a trifle unwell, but rose none the less and let them in, not without having first cried from behind the door, "Who goes there?" They told her all the latest, their hopes both shattered and forlorn. They described how they had been chased by the bull. She left the room and came back with the umbrella. Camier manipulated it at length. "But it's in perfect trim," he said, "quite perfect." "I mended it," said Helen. "Perhaps, if possible, more perfect than before," said Camier. "If possible, perhaps," said Helen. "It opens like a dream," said Camier, "and when I release, click, the catch, it collapses unaided. I open, I close, 1, 2, click, plop, click, plop." "Have done," said Mercier, "before you break it on us again." "I am a trifle unwell," said Helen. "No better omen," said Camier, but the sack was nowhere to be seen. "I don't see the parrot," said Mercier. "I put it out in the country," said Helen. They passed a peaceful night, for them, without debauch of any kind. All next day they spent within doors. Time tending to drag, they manuspurated mildly, without fatigue. Before the blazing fire, in the twofold light of lamp and leaden day, they squirmed gently on the carpet, their naked bodies mingled, fingering and fondling with the languorous tact of hands arranging flowers, while the rain beat on the panes. How delicious that must have been! Towards evening, Helen fetched up some vintage bottles, and they drifted off contentedly to sleep. Men, less tenacious, might not have withstood the temptation to leave it at that. But the following afternoon found them in the street again, with no other thought than the goal they had assigned themselves. Only a few more hours and it would be night. Nightfall. A few more leaden hours. So no time was to be lost. Yet even total darkness, total but for the street lamps, so far from hindering their quest, could only further it, all things considered. For the district they now aimed to get to, one to which they hardly knew the way, would be easier for them to get to by night than by day, since the one time they had got to it before, the one and only time, it had not been day, no, but night, nightfall. So they entered a bar, for it is in bars that the Merciers of this world, and the Camiers, find it least tedious to await the dark. For this they had another, if less weighty reason, namely the advantage to be derived, on the mental level too, from immersion as complete as possible in that selfsame atmosphere which had so unsteadied their first steps. They set to, therefore, without delay. "There is too much at stake," said Camier, "for us to neglect the elementary precautions." Thus, with a single stone, they accounted for 2 birds, and even 3. For they availed themselves of the respite to talk freely of this and that, with great profit to themselves. For it is in bars that the Merciers of this heavenly planet and the Camiers talk with greatest freedom, greatest profit. Finally, a great light bathed their understandings, flooding in particular the following concepts. 1. The lack of money is an evil, but it can turn to a good. 2. What is lost is lost. 3. The bicycle is a great good, but it can turn nasty, if ill employed. 4. There is food for thought in being down and out. 5. There are 2 needs, the need you have and the need to have it. 6. Intuition leads to many a folly. 7. That which the soul spews forth is never lost. 8. Pockets daily emptier of their last resources are enough to break the stoutest resolution. 9. The male trouser has got stuck in a rut, particularly the fly, which should be transferred to the crotch and designed to open trapwise, permitting the testes, regardless of the whole sordid business of micturition, to take the air unobserved. The drawers should of course be transfigured in consequence. 10. Contrary to a prevalent opinion, there are places in nature from which God would appear to be absent. 11. What would one do without women? Explore other channels. 12. Soul, another 4-letter word. 13. What can be said of life not already said? Many things. That its arse is a rotten shot, for example. These illustrations did not blind them to the goal they had in view. This appeared to them, however, with ever-increasing clarity as time wore on, one to be pursued with calm and collection. And being still just calm and collected enough to know they were no longer, so they reached without difficulty the happy decision to postpone all action to the following day, and even, if necessary, to the next but one. They returned then in excellent spirits to Helen's apartment, and dropped asleep without further ceremony, and even the following day they refrained from the pretty frolics of wet forenoons, so keen were they to be on their toes for the trials to come. It was chiming midday when they left the house. In the porch they paused. "Oh, the pretty rainbow," said Camier. "The umbrella," said Mercier. They exchanged a look. Camier vanished up the stairs. When he reappeared, with the umbrella, Mercier said, "You took your time." "Oh, you know," said Camier. "One does what one can. Are we to put it up?" Mercier scrutinized the sky. "What do you think?" he said. Camier left the shelter of the porch and submitted the sky to a thorough inspection, turning Celtically to the north, the east, the south, and finally the west, in that order. "Well?" said Mercier. "Don't rush me," said Camier. He advanced to the corner of the street in order to reduce the risk of error. Finally, he regained the porch and delivered his considered opinion. "In our shoes I wouldn't," he said. "And may one inquire why not?" said Mercier. "It's coming down, if I am to believe my eyes. Can you not sense you're wet?" "Your inclination would be to put it up," said Camier. "I don't say that," said Mercier. "I simply ask myself when we'll put it up, if we do not do so now." To the unprejudiced eye, it was less an umbrella than a parasol. From the tip of the spike to the ends of the stays or struts was a bare quarter of the total length. The stick was terminated by an amber knob with tassels. The material was red in color, or had been, indeed still was in places. Shreds of fringe adorned the perimeter at irregular intervals. "Look at it," said Camier. "Take it in your hand. Come on, take it in your hand. It won't bite you." "Stand back," cried Mercier. "Where was it dug up at all?" said Camier. "I bought it at Cahn's," said Mercier, knowing we had only one raincoat to our name. "He asked a shilling for it. I got it for 8 pence. I thought he was going to embrace me." "It must have come out about 1900, said Camier. "The year, I believe, of Ladysmith on the Clip, remember? Cloudless skies, garden parties daily. Life lay smiling before us. No hope was too high. We played at holding fort. We died like flies, of hunger, of cold, of thirst, of heat. Pom-pom, the last rounds, surrender, never. We eat our dead, drink our pee, pom-pom, 2 more we didn't know we had. But what is that we hear? A clamour from the watchtower, dust on the horizon, the column at last. Our tongues are black, hurrah nonetheless, hurrah, hurrah. A craking as of crows. A quartermaster dies of joy. We are saved. The century was 2 months old." "Look at it now," said Mercier. A silence ensued, which Camier was the first to violate. "Well," he said, "do we put it up now, or wait for the weather to worsen?" Mercier scrutinized the inscrutable sky. "Go take a look," he said, "and see what you think." Camier again gained the corner of the street. On his return, he said, "There is perhaps a little light below the verge. Would you have me go up on the roof?" Mercier concentrated. Finally, he exclaimed impulsively, "Let us put it up and pray for the best." But Camier could not put it up. "Give it here to me," said Mercier. But Mercier had no better success. He brandished it above his head, but controlled himself in time. "What have we done to God?" he said. "Denied him," said Camier. "Don't tell me he is all that rancorous," said Mercier. Camier took the umbrella and vanished up the stairs. No sooner was he alone than Mercier went. His path crossed, at a given moment, that of an old man of weird and wretched aspect, carrying under his arm what looked like a board folded in two. It seemed to Mercier he had seen him somewhere before, and he wondered as he went on his way where that somewhere could have been. The old man, too, on whom, for a wonder, the transit of Mercier had not been lost, was left with the impression of a scarecrow encountered elsewhere, and busied himself for a space with trying to recall in what circumstances. So, as with laboured steps they drew apart, each occupied the other's thoughts in vain. But the least little thing halts the Merciers of this world. A murmur coming to its crest and breaking, a voice saying how strange the autumn tide of day, no matter what the season. A new beginning, but with no life in it. How could there be? More manifest in town than in the country, but in the country too, where slowly, over the vast empty space, the peasant seems to stray, so aimless that night must surely overtake him far from the village nowhere, the homestead nowhere to be seen. There is no time left, and yet how it drags. Even the flowers seem past their time to close, and a kind of panic seizes on the tired wings. The hawk stoops always too soon, the rooks rise from the fallows while it is still light, and flock to their places of assembly, there to croak and squabble till nightfall. Then, too late, they agitate to set out again. Day is over long before it ends, man ready to drop long before the hour of rest. But not a word. Evening is all fever, a scurrying to and fro to no avail. So short, it is not worth their while beginning. Too long for them not to begin. That is the time they are pent up in, as cruelly as Baloo in his cage. Ask the hour of a passer-by, and he'll throw it at you over his shoulder, at a venture, and hurry on. But you may be easy in your mind. He is not far wrong, who every few minutes consults his watch, sets it by official astronomic time, makes his reckonings, wonders how on earth to fit in all he has to do before the endless day comes to an end. Or with furious weary gesture he gives the hour that besets him, the hour it always was and will be, one that to the beauties of too late unites the charms of prematurity, that of the never, without more of an even dreader raven. But all day that is how it is, from the first tick to the last tack, or rather from the third to the antepenultimate, allowing for the time it needs, the tam-tam within, to drum you back into the dream and drum you back out again. And in between all are heard every millet grain that falls. You look behind, and there you are, every day a little closer, all life a little closer. Joy in salt spoonfuls, like water when it's thirst you're dying of. And a bonny little agony, homeopathically distilled. What more can you ask? A heart in the room of the heart? Come, come. But ask, on the contrary, your way of the passer-by, and he'll take your hand and lead you, by the Warren's beauty spots, to the very place. It's a great grey barracks of a building, unfinished, unfinishable, with 2 doors, for those who enter and for those who leave, and at the windows faces peering out. The more fool you to have asked. Mercier's hand released the railing to which this attack of wind had fastened it. But he had not gone far when he stopped again to observe, advancing towards him, a ragged, shaggy old man plodding along beside a donkey. The latter, unbridled, set with small steps its dainty, dogged course beside the curb, unswervingly, except to circumvent a stationary vehicle or a group of urchins at marbles on their hunkers in the gutter. The man walked in the street, between the grey haunch and the hostile cars. They raised their eyes from the ground only when danger threatened to take its measure. Mercier said to himself, disappointing again as usual, no outerness will ever disestablish that harmony. It was perhaps too great a call on his strength, this parting from Camier at so sombre an hour. Admittedly, strength was needed for to stay with Camier, no less than for to stay with Mercier, but less than for the horrors of soliloquy. Yet there he is on his way again. The voice has ceased. He is over the worst of the old man and the donkey. His being fills again with that merciful fog which is the best he knows. He's good for the long road yet. His dim shape moves on, hugging the railing, in the shadow of God knows what evergreens, so cold. Hollies, perhaps, if shadow is the word for a light hardly less leaden than that of the bogland nearby. The collar of his coat is turned up. His right hand is in his left sleeve, and vice versa. They lie jogging on his belly in senile abandon. Now and then he glimpses, as through shifting seaweed, a foot dragging on a flagstone. Heavy chains, hung between small stone pillars, festoon with their mossy garlands the pavement on the street side. Once in motion, they swing on and on, steadily or with serpentine writhings. Here Mercier would come to play when he was small. Running along the line of chains, he set them going, one after another, with a stick, then turned back to look how the great jolt shook the pavement from end to end, till it seemed they would never come to rest.